What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Death and Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and it's an exciting weekend because we have the next wave of releases for Warhammer 40,000 available to us. This is Codex Dark Angels, and we're going to talk about it. The rules have begun to leak, and so like I do with Death Guard, I'm going to be splitting this topic into a couple different videos. I'm going to start by talking about the Dark Angels, faction abilities, stratagems, relics, and all of their pregame selection, stuff like that. In another video, I'm going to talk about their updated data sheets and points. We do have, as far as I know, all of the information for this faction, so theoretically this should be a pretty complete review of the Codex. But if I do miss anything, I do apologize. I am working off the leaked rules right now. But anyway, here we go into the 9th edition Dark Angels Codex Supplement, and this is some sweet cover art, I'm not gonna lie. So the first big thing that's changed that I think we were all made aware of in Warhammer community articles on the lead up to this release was the new detachment abilities for the faction, which has given us a really cool thing in the first and second company detachment distinctions. This essentially allows Dark Angels detachments to be brought from entirely either the Deathwing for first company or the Ravenwing for second company, and gives them some additional bonuses. Now, the downside of this is that you have to make up those detachments from either a Vanguard detachment for first company, so that is the Elites slot heavy detachment, or an Outrider detachment for second company or Ravenwing, which is the one with all the fast attack options. If you do, though, you get some big benefits. You get objective secured on all of your Deathwing Terminator squads, regular Terminator squads, Assault Terminator squads, Relic Terminator squads, mostly just your Deathwing Terminator squads. Interestingly, not Deathwing Command squads. And they gain objective secured. Ostensibly, for second company, it's Bike squads and Outrider squads. So, kind of the bare bones regular versions of those particular unit types. We're not any specialist Bike squads. We're not getting objective secured Ravenwing Black Knights or Deathwing Knights. You also get to effectively be a battalion in that you can refund your command points if your Warlord is part of that detachment. I like that a lot. It offsets the cost of bringing those specialist detachments, because usually you want your Warlord to be in a patrol or a battalion in order to get those CP back, but the Vanguard and Outrider do not natively do that. We also have a really big change in the Jink and Inner Circle keywords, in that these keywords are given to units of the appropriate type. So Ravenwing units, that's basically all of the bikers, most of the land speeders in the faction, are all going to get Jink if they have Ravenwing. And the same goes for Inner Circle and Deathwing. Now, what those abilities do has not changed. Jink gives you a 5+ invulnerable save against ranged attacks as long as the model moved, or the unit moved that turn. They also get a 4+ invulnerable save if they advanced, and Inner Circle gives you permanent transhuman physiology, so you cannot be wounded on any roll below a 4. You have trouble falling back, but you are immune to morale. This means that those keywords that the Space Marine Codex put on all sorts of units, like Blade Guard Veterans for Deathwing, for example, now also give you the related ability. These abilities are given to units in a Dark Angels detachment. As long as the detachment isn't souped, you can still bring Agent of the Imperium and Unaligned as normal. However, you do lose some stuff if your army is souped, so if you have anything else besides Dark Angels, Agent of the Imperium, or Unaligned in your army, you do lose the ability to take first and second company detachments entirely, so those just become normal Vanguard and Outriders if anybody else comes in. And you also lose these kind of specialist super doctrines we'll talk about in a moment. Just like normal super doctrines, those will go away as soon as you soup anybody in. Now, there's also this weird restriction on captains. Captains already are restricted by the Space Marine Codex, but the Dark Angels Codex has an additional restriction in that you can only include one Ravenwing captain and one Deathwing captain from your chapter in the army. Kind of a strange distinction, especially if you're putting all of your Ravenwing in your second company and all your Deathwing in your first company. Like, you won't be able to take multiple captains anyway. But I guess that is what it is. But interestingly, that only applies if it's a soup detachment. So if you take like an unaligned Adeptus Astartes detachment, then you can include multiple Deathwing captains. I guess they don't get Inner Circle, so they're not as worried about it, but I don't know, it's weird. Moving on to the Super Doctrine abilities, these are pretty cool. Essentially, every mini sub-faction of the Dark Angels have gotten their own Super Doctrine. Previously, the army-wide Super Doctrine was plus 3 inches of range, or plus 6 inches of range, depending on your weapon type during Devastator Doctrine, but it has been changed so that the army actually has multiple super doctrines available at any one time. For those who don't know, super doctrine is the catch-all term for any abilities that are active only during a particular doctrine for your Space Marine army. So, for example, for Ultramarines, that's their always count as stationary during tactical doctrine. For Salamanders, it's their +1 to wound for Melta and Flavor weapons, all that stuff. And in this case, Ravenwing, Deathwing, and Green Marines, the non-wing aligned units in the chapter, all get their own. Ravenwing get +3 inches of move during Devastator Doctrine, so first turn of the game when movement is going to be very important. That is pretty good. You can also advance and shoot, and this is a little bit of an interesting way this rule works. It doesn't just turn your weapons into assault weapons. It gives you the same penalty as assault weapons do, but you keep your normal weapon type. So if you are a biker with a twin bolt gun on the front of your bike, which is rapid fire 2, and you advance, instead of being assault 2 and firing 2 shots, it's still going to be rapid fire 2. So you get to fire 4 shots at half range, or I guess full range because of your bolter discipline, but you still get the -1 to hit. So pretty cool. It allows you to maneuver around your heavy weapons and still make use of them. The unaligned units, just the green Dark Angels boys, get the ability to fire rapid fire and assault weapons within engagement range of enemy units. Honestly, this is not very good. It doesn't affect Deathwing models, so you can't ever sort of cross streams with these super doctrine abilities, but that also means that the units that are probably most likely to get stuck into your opponent's army and be in melee for multiple turns also can't make use of the super doctrine. This is during tactical doctrine. I mean, the times you're going to be able to make use of this are going to be few and far between, so I don't think I would put much thought into it, to be perfectly honest. And last but not least, Implacable for the Deathwing models. This is a big, huge one. You get full rerolls to wound in melee against any models with a wounds characteristic of 8 or more. And as we'll see later on in this codex, a lot of the Deathwing stuff is really keyed towards pulling down really big, heavy targets, I think, as befits a company made entirely of Terminators. And this just helps a lot. Now, another big change, and the one that people have been talking about, is Rites of Initiation to induct models into the Deathwing. This mostly just unlocks that model to be included in a Deathwing detachment. So you do have to pay a premium if you want to bring any non-natively Deathwing units into your detachment. Captains are already costed an extra 20 points, and they do get that built-in transhuman physiology, assuming that they're in a Dark Angels detachment. So that makes sense. You also have to pay a couple extra points for your transports and vehicles and stuff like that. It doesn't really do anything for you, so that's too bad. Because they're not infantry, they don't get that perma transhuman, and they're not, susceptible to morale. So it's just paying for the ability to get that detachment, but it makes a ton of sense given how powerful the detachment is that, it would just generally cost a little bit more. And then moving on, I think more interesting parts of the codex here. Let's talk about some stratagems, and we have some really cool ones. Wrath of the Lion is the standard +1 AP on rolls of 6 strat that during their special doctrine that all of the Space Marine chapters get. These are almost always bad, so just kind of ignore that one. Intractable is a classic stratagem for Dark Angels, lets them fall back and shoot. Pretty strong. 2 CP is pretty pricey for that, though, and given that you do have hit-and-run warfare for your biker units for Ravenwing, you're probably not going to be needing to use it there, but it is okay for if you're taking, for example, shooty Terminator squads, which synergize pretty well with the Deathwing Assault stratagem we'll talk about in a sec. Being able to fall back and shoot bolters with those guys is going to be pretty okay. But like I said, Deathwing Assault, 1 CP gives you +1 to wound with your ranged weapons as soon as you come out of Deep Strike. So it looks like a little bit of the focus is shifting from Deathwing from the Knights to the standard Terminator squads. The Knights, like, you always wanted to use a combined assault, come in, hit really hard in melee, make this sort of really powerful beta strike. But the Terminators themselves always felt a little bit sort of left behind because they just shot bolt guns at people. This certainly helps them out if you can drop in a unit of 5 Terminators, 1 CP to give them +1 to wound is pretty awesome. We've been doing that for ages in Chaos Space Marines, so it makes a lot of sense that Dark Angels will be able to do it too. I guess there's a room for a Dark Angels or Chaos Space Marines joke there, but I'm not going to make that, I'm classy. Full Throttle is returning, gives you a 12-inch move after a Ravenwing unit from your army advances. A little bit of a change from the previous edition. Full Throttle used to be able to trigger if you had not advanced and just give you a second movement. If you hadn't advanced the first time, this allowed you to advance the second time, which was pretty cool. So you could get that extra 6 inches for the turbo boost. And it was your actual movement, so usually you'd be moving 14 or 16 inches with that biker. This is just capped at 12, but honestly, I don't know how often you need to go more than 32 inches in a turn, so this is probably okay. It does feel to me that while I think Deathwing are sort of drawing all of the attention given how impactful they are, like when they come on the table, putting a bunch of Terminators with Transhuman and +1 to wound and full rerolls and all that stuff on the table is really scary, but I do think Ravenwing are being kind of really heavily pushed here Being able to give Jink to a lot of stuff is very important, especially since that stuff didn't already have easy access to invulnerable saves, unlike a lot of the stuff that's getting Inner Circle, which you already had Transhuman sort of active on anyway naturally. Like, oh no, my Blade Guard veterans are Transhuman. They were already going to be Transhuman, so that we're just saving some CP, I guess. Whereas giving Jink to a bunch of bikers that didn't have it before is a really big deal, and you can present sort of a unified 4+ invulnerable save across the faction, which is going to be gross, but then also they get objective secured, and they retain these double moving stratagems, which means that they are going to be incredible at grabbing objectives from people. Being able to throw a biker unit 20 inches with an advance, full throttle for another 12, break all your banners, contest all your objectives, it's going to be a nightmare to play against. Terminators and slow models like that usually had objectives secured from Rites of War anyway. The bikers didn't because they were often too far away from the Rites of War aura to benefit from it. So giving them objectives secured is much more impactful than doing the same thing for Terminators. I think that Ravenwing, especially with stratagems like that, are going to be incredibly powerful. Line Unbreakable is another interesting one. Makes your infantry units immune for 1 CP to enemy models in melee that are not within engagement range. So that means that you can't attack chain off of people and do the half-inch within a half-inch thing in order to get more of your army in melee. This makes Dark Angels infantry almost impossible to take out by hordes. I mean, Orc boys are already having a tough time of it, and being able to stop them from attacking in 2 or 3 ranks is going to make them impossible to kill these guys. It's going to be tough for melee infantry armies to engage into Dark Angels, specifically infantry, but they can attack the bikers just fine. High Speed Focus is a classic returning, although with a big, huge nerf, it targets a Ravenwing vehicle from your army and gives it a 4+ invulnerable save. It used to be able to give that to any Ravenwing unit, so even if your bikers had not advanced, you could still get them a 4+ invulnerable save. Now it's only vehicles, so essentially you are incentivized to not advance with your Storm Speeders and Land Speeders, for example, because then you can give them that 4+ invulnerable save on the swing back. Pretty okay, but unfortunately not quite as powerful as it used to be. No foe too great to subdue, a buff to Deathwing Knights specifically, gives them +1 to wound and +1 AP against vehicles and monsters. Now, unfortunately, one thing that we're noticing as we're going through these stratagems here is that there is no combined assault, so we don't have any way to put those Deathwing Knights closer to the enemy army than they already would be. We can improve a charge roll out of Deep Strike a couple different ways. There is a combo in this faction itself to give them +2 to charge passively. You can also use Canticle of Hate for +2 to charge, potentially off a Inspiring Oratory to make it automatically pass, and then you can try to roll a 7 out of Deep Strike. I don't know, rolling 7s even with a reroll kind of inconsistent, and I'm not sure I would want to put a super expensive unit of Deathwing Knights sort of in the middle of the table, especially since they're relatively slow, with the intention of charging stuff, because they're going to fail. And that could potentially just lose you the game with how expensive those Terminators are going to be. So I think the age of Deathwing Knights may be over, given that there's no combined assault in the Codex. So I'm not sure how much the stratagem is going to see use. It's also +1 to wound, but you already have full rerolls to wound for being Deathwing in the Assault Doctrine. So I'm not sure why you would also need +1 on top of that for 2 CP. It seems too expensive. It seems too corner case. I don't think that it's going to be a stratagem that you're going to build an army around. Marked for Command, Paragon of the Chapter, Honored by the Rock. These all give you your extra Warlord traits and Special Issue Wargear and Relics. We won't talk about those too much. It's pretty standard in almost every codex now, so that's nice. Tactical Appraisal is basically a adaptive strategy with extra steps. You get to set a unit into any combat doctrine that you want, which is awesome. Adaptive strategy already sees a ton of play in Space Marine armies, and this is just basically the same thing. The downside is that you can only select a unit that's within 6 inches of your Warlord. So you kind of have to death ball up as Dark Angels to get a lot of these kind of close range abilities. But if you do, it's only 1 CP, so you get a 1 CP discount on it. And in addition, it's a different stratagem from adaptive strategy, so you can use both of them in the same turn to set multiple models in your army into a doctrine that you want. I think really excellent, and especially if you're trying to make use of that Deathwing Super Doctrine for full rerolls, alongside, using Ravenwing stuff to get the benefit of the Devastator Doctrine. I think that's going to be very powerful. The Hunt is a really big one, and I think another piece of evidence into the case that Ravenwing is being really super pushed in this codex. It's a pregame move at the start of the first battle round for any Ravenwing unit. You can move it with the movement phase, you just have to end 9 inches away from enemy models. This is incredible. You can take a lot of board space, you can use that to fix your positioning. I believe you do still get your +3 inches for being in Devastator Doctrine, since it's the start of the first battle round. So you're able to move a unit of bikers probably 17-ish inches, maybe a little bit more depending on the other abilities that you have active. And that can really change up your positioning. You can take cover up in the front. You can, sort of set up for a really big alpha strike. I think this stratagem is going to be incredible. I think you're going to see it played a ton. And I'm not looking forward to playing against it. It's making Ravenwing feel very much like Raven Guard style play, where you can push really far forward on turn 1. You put up a bunch of objective secured models in your opponent's deployment zone. Even if they can kill them, you're going to be set the line of battle so far onto their side and deal so much damage on the top of one that it might be unrecoverable. If like 10 Black Knights come on in, there's ways we'll talk about later to give them full rerolls in the fight phase. We have Weapons of the Dark Age right here on this side. We can buff their plasma weapons as well. You can absolutely perform a devastating alpha strike with a big unit of Black Knights, and if your opponent cannot respond effectively, the game's over already. I don't like that, but it is super powerful, so there it is. Targeting Guidance is another interesting one. You select a unit within 18 inches invisible to a land speeder or storm speeder, and everybody shooting at it gets +1 to hit. Pretty good. One thing that we did notice is that it does require a Ravenwing Landspeeder Storm Speeder. Landspeeder Storms, which is where my mind immediately went with the stratagem, unfortunately do not get the Ravenwing keyword. They're just still Green Marine dedicated transport vehicles. So you do actually have to take a Landspeeder or a Storm Speeder. But if you do, you get this little benefit as well, which is nice. 2 CP though, that's a lot. And also it being +1 to hit, not +1 to wound. +1 to hit you can source all over the place in a Space Marine army, so I'm not sure how often this is going to see play, but if you do have those fast movers in your army, it may be a pretty interesting pick. Swift Strike, this is a new one, and again, more buffs for Ravenwing. This is just curtain fall for Ravenwing units. After you fight in the fight phase, you can fall back as if it were the movement phase. Yikes, dude. This is incredible. Again, we can do some ridiculous stuff with Black Knights, like coming in turn 1, using the hunt, getting up the table, weapons from the Dark Age to shoot, I don't know, like 6 tanks to death. Charge in, hit your opponent really hard. Swift Strike to reposition yourself either out of line of sight. You can actually just use your bases to string across your opponent's deployment zone so they can't move their army. It's going to be disgusting, and I'm not excited to play against it. Also, that's going to give some of the Ravenwing characters that were a little squishy, maybe Samael or Talon Masters, it's going to give them the ability to fight in and out of melee a little bit more effectively. This seems incredible, and I'm not looking forward to play against it. Secret Agenda is an interesting one. I'm not sure how much it matters, but we'll see how it does in sort of the meta of secondary objectives. It lets you hide one of your secondaries throughout the course of the game and only reveal it as soon as you score VPs on it. That's pretty cool. It seems kind of weird, though. There's a lot of secondary objectives that also require additional picks. So we'll talk about the Dark Angel specific secondary objectives momentarily, and there's some important ones in there. But that then they require you to divulge additional information. So your opponent probably already knows what you're doing. And honestly, like, secondary objectives aren't that like difficult to suss out, especially since there's a lot of secondaries that you have to perform actions to do too. Like if you didn't tell your opponent you had deploy scramblers as a secondary, I think that would be pretty good. Except that your army has to deploy multiple scramblers before you score any points on it and have to reveal that that's a secondary that you have. So before you get to the point where you reveal the secondary, you've already told your opponent you have deploy scramblers. They could already counterplay it. This seems fun and fluffy, but I think in practice it's not going to be that good at all. So I would mostly ignore it. Save your CP. Good players will know what you have in your secondaries, or they just don't care. Stasis Shell stops enemies from falling back if you shoot them with a grenade launcher. All right, that's fine. I don't know how impactful that's going to be, and I don't know how many people to actually take grenade launchers on their bikes. I don't think very often. And last but certainly not least, we have It's Back, everyone's favorite Weapons of the Dark Age for Dark Angels. Really glad that this has made it back in the Codex because, I mean, A, it's really powerful, and it's also kind of cool to just be able to nuke people with sort of unsupercharged plasma weapons. Games Workshop keeps pushing this narrative that Dark Angels use plasma weapons a lot, but when they removed Weapons of the Dark Age, it wasn't really mechanically represented at all. You just got plasma talons on people sometimes randomly, but they weren't ever actually very good at using them. So it makes a ton of sense, like sort of from a fluff perspective, that you would be incentivized to take plasma weapons. Given how powerful Inceptors are right now, a big unit of plasma Inceptors is probably going to be like basically required for a lot of Dark Angels lists. Those guys already do an immense amount of damage, but damage reduction can really hurt them, and this just gets right around that. That you can sink those guys into Mortarion, you're going to be wounding on 3s or 4s, and you're still going to be hitting him for 2 flat damage apiece every time you shoot him, like 35 times with that unit. So So I think that's going to be good. Also going to be good on the plasma talons that you have, randomly around your Deathwing stuff, or your Ravenwing stuff, excuse me. And yeah, I mean, it's just going to be awesome. I think we know how powerful Weapons of the Dark Ages, given that how much it was used in the previous versions of the Codex. I'm going to call it there for now for this video because it is getting a little bit long and I don't want it to run super long. But stay tuned for the next video where I go over the remainder of the pregame selections, Warlord traits, relics, psychic powers, stuff like that. And then, obviously, we'll dive into data sheets in the video after that. So 3 video series on coverage of the new Dark Angels Codex leaks. Stay tuned. And big thanks for watching to the end of the video. Also, big thanks to my patrons over at patreon.com/tacticaltortoise. They do a lot to help out this style of content, and I would really appreciate it if you go check them out and visit them. They're the best. All right, thanks everybody. Keep it classy, folks, and remember to have happy wargaming.